Common Council. Thank you. And we'll call the meeting to order at 7:01 p.m. just to now that we're recording. And we're going to do, I'm just going to announce who's here. Ms. Shanahan, Mr. Livingston, Mr. Hubelman, Ms. Young, and I see where Greg has got a lot of time on his hands. He's also with us this evening. Good evening, Mr. Okay, now we're going to open this up to public participation. I don't know, Sabrina, are you with us tonight, or who will be handling public participation if we have anyone?
Hey, this is Jeff. Sabrina's off, I believe. So no, I don't see any attendees.
Okay, no one has a guest. They'd like to raise their hand. No, going once, going twice. Okay, we will close public participation and now move on to administration, which is the approval of the minutes of February 2nd, 2023. Would someone like to move that? Thank you, Ms. Shanahan. Okay, any deletions, omissions, any modifications to the minutes before I call for the vote? Okay.
Hey, Chairman Kites,
Yes.
are we supposed to be transmitting on YouTube right now? Because that may be why there's no attendees. Usually they have to launch it on YouTube.
I guess I gotta refer to my the gentleman who's handling our meeting this evening.
Webinar. I just wanted to make sure that we're doing okay.
The notes. I mean, I don't see it that we were supposed to, but I can do that.
Yeah, the planning and zoning actually looks like they're live right now.
Oh, okay. All right.
And that's where your public is. They're all there. So sorry about that.
All right.
You got
Thank
second.
you. Sorry, I
vote.
just want to make sure we're right.
Get a water, please. There, okay. All right, thank you for pointing that out. Okay, and so Ms. Shanahan had moved the minutes. So like I had asked, are there any deletions, omissions, corrections? Okay, seeing none. All in favor, please raise your hand. Signify yes. And that is unanimous. Great. Okay, moving on to new business under item A on the planning and zoning is the development update. I know, Steve, you've done this for us in the past. We thought it was appropriate that you come back to us and kind of let us know what's going on around town, especially after one of the plans we have passed. A lot of let's just say attention that's been brought to development around Norwalk. So I thought it was appropriate time for you to come back and give us that update. So I know you've got this other meeting going on, so we'll try not to keep you too long.
No, I think I may just stay here, even if the meeting closes, if that's all right. I'll just sit in the dark for a while. I don't have any slides for you, but I'm happy just to talk through some of the things that are going on. And I'm happy to come back April or a later date, if that's better for you guys, to go through anything in depth. I know in the past we've shared the project development map for different things going on. We're in the process of updating that now. So I can have the link sent out to you guys next week when that's live. So that'll be just a little more up to date. Because I think right now some of the things that are up there probably need to come down. And I just want to make sure some of the newer approvals have been put on the site. So, but I'll definitely send that out when it's updated. You've probably seen, just being around town, 10 Monroe Street, which is across from the police station, is up and out of the ground. They're moving pretty quickly on that project. And then the large project, 467 West Avenue, known as the Pinnacle, is also starting to come out of the ground a little bit. So those are two projects that are going on.
Can you explain to us what's going on across from the police station, just for those unaware?
Sure. And that's the 10 Monroe Street is the actual address, and that's what we kind of know the project by. But that's a mixed use development that was approved, I think, in early 2022. So basically what's going to happen, there's the two corner buildings. You can see some demolition work they've done on those, and those are going to get rehabbed and restored and made to look really nice and shiny again. And kind of in the sandwiched in between into the rear of those is going to be a larger mixed use development. It's about I think it's 150 units, I think, all in total. And the idea is, like, in the middle between those two kind of corner buildings, there's going to be a public place. Hopefully they'll have flanking restaurants, maybe perhaps on the ground floors of each one of those buildings. And that'll be like a public area with seating out inside that area. But that's a project that was approved, like I said, in 2022. there are workforce housing units that were incorporated into that as well. So that is a Spinnaker project.
Okay, Darlene, I see your hand up. Do you have a question or are you just voting yes to the minutes?
No, I have a question. Thank you. And you kind of answered them, Steve, because I wanted to know what was happening to those two corner end buildings because they weren't torn down, so they're being rehabbed, right?
Correct. Yeah, they should. I think the one closest to South Main is less work involved. The one on the corner of Chestnut needed a lot more work, but that, you know, they have to do all the brickwork that needs to get touched up, new windows. Should look really nice once it's done. And that one, I think, is strictly commercial, the whole building. I don't believe there was any residential units in that building. And the one on the other corner is just the one-story commercial building.
And so are those businesses that are there? I think it's like a little restaurant is still there. I don't know about the barber shop and the others. Are they staying?
As far as I know, I don't know the length of the leases that they have with the current landlord. I can ask them, but I don't know that top of my head.
Okay. And when is it scheduled to be completed?
I don't know if they're going to get it done this calendar year or not. That's a good question. I can ask them. It's typically like an 18-month to 24-month process to kind of, you know, start to finish on that, but it seems like they are moving pretty quickly. But
Yeah.
I can definitely ask and get that information for you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, please proceed, Steve.
I'm sorry. And he had one, and Tom had his hand up, but you also said there were workforce housing or affordable units. Do we know how many?
I'll get that. I probably should. I could have pulled this up for you. Maybe as I'm talking, I'll try to figure that out because they're required to give at least 10%, but there are some formulas that they can apply to potentially reduce that if they give us something else, perhaps like a 3-bedroom unit for example, that can count as 2 units. But I'll dig that out as I'm going through questions. I'll circle.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hey,
Tom?
Steve, thank you. Apologize if you already touched on this. On the 64 South Main Street, the Clark showroom, they got approval on that before for a project, right?
Yes, and then they actually withdrew their approval. They actually decided
okay.
they didn't want to go forward.
So that's
So
not.
I've not heard anything active on that site right now.
No, that's a shame. I like that project. Okay, thank you.
So to Tom's question, didn't they tear down a couple of homes for that project?
That
They were-
project.
Didn't they do some demolition?
I don't believe so. That part of the approval that they got was they were going to save. I think there were 3 historic or older, I should say, houses on that
Houses, right.
street. And they were going to save, I think, at least 2 of them. And what we did, we put a regulation a few years ago that if you save a historic structure, you can get a bonus and apply that bonus to your project. So that was kind of like one of the trade-offs we made.
Yeah.
All right. So that project is not going forward.
I think that they would have to make a new application again if they were going to seek to move forward on that.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure. Or anybody else, or you want me to jump forward?
Steve, are you gonna just run through a list or are we gonna go back? I mean, whatever you got planned, buddy.
Anything I don't have answers for, I can easily email you tomorrow. I'm trying to do like talk and research at the same time and sometimes.
All right, might as well jump to the Lomans development over there. How's that working out? I heard that's
I think they're on schedule. As far as I know, I think they have a grand, like a ribbon cutting kind of thing sometime in April. So at that point, I think they'll be, much further along now. There's a lot of, that's a really large site. So there's a lot more site work involved that's got parking below grade. So they had to kind of, rectify the existing excavation that was done with what else was needed for the rest of the site. Plus there's a lot of city infrastructure that's going to go along with that one in terms of the sidewalks and the streetscape and utilities. So that's a, much more involved project. And given the scale, I think over time, it's just going to take a little longer for that to, move forward and be fully constructed.
we've had a few different versions of that development. Where did it end up as? as far as the ratio of residential to commercial and so forth?
So the initial, I think there were a total of 3 iterations from when the city first approved it, which actually predates my time with the city. And it initially started out as a much smaller scale project in terms of like the height. And it was more geared towards commercial. But I think a lot of that was Sono, the Sono collection as well. So I think a lot of either the retailers or the retail volume got sucked into that development. And so they ended up pulling it back. The second iteration of the project that came forward had a really good chunk of commercial space. There was a small, I call it like a boutique bowling alley, and then like a small boutique movie theater that were planned within it. And then COVID hit, and then all that kind of, they in their opinion, that the market for those amenities had washed up. So they came back with much smaller scale, kind of ground floor, street facing commercial, which would be different restaurants or shops or something kind of consistent what you see with the rest of the Waypoint development. But the residential unit total had gone up quite a bit. So I think that project's north of 400 units, if I remember correctly.
And how about at the end of the connector down there with residential units? Wasn't there talk of expanding that development?
Which one? I'm not sure which one you're talking about.
Oh, the connector going to Route 7.
Oh, you're talking about Glover Avenue and
Correct.
Yeah. So that whole master plan, which was called North 7, was approved by the commission. I think also early 22 or I think the first half of 22 at the very least. So that project will happen in 3 stages because there are significant public works. And when I'm saying public works, these will be probably state of Connecticut DOT projects that have to happen before they can move forward. So the first phase is the one that they can get permits for now. That one is at the southern end, and those are in proximity to the new train station. The middle section can't get completed until the on-ramp and off-ramp connections at Merritt and 7 are complete, as well as the new bridge off of Glover Avenue. And the last that we heard, and this is a DOT timeline, keep in mind that those improvements probably wouldn't get completed until at least 2025. Then the third phase of the project, which is at the northern end, can't get completed until improvements to the Glover Avenue, Grist Mill, Route 7 connector, as well as improvements on Main Avenue have to happen. And those aren't even DOT projects at this point. There's been some conceptual ideas kicked around. They know it needs to get done, but it's not even on their short-term radar. So that northern phase might not happen for 10 years at this rate. And who knows what the market conditions are at that point, where they might rethink that part of the project. One nice thing, at least on that piece of the project, there's a public park that's going to get built that will be over 1.5 acres. That will connect to the NRVT and it'll have additional walking trails to other parts of the site. So that could be a nice amenity, but it won't, it's not like something you're going to see right away. Just, I don't want to get anybody's hopes up on that piece, but it will happen down the road.
Down the road. Before I pass this on, just one more. What's, obviously the hot topic of the moment is the Wells Fargo development, where I believe the commission is meeting now to approve it. Or
Yeah, so
to vote on it.
The public hearing just started at 6 p.m. I'm guessing that the applicant, they're going to be presenting till at least 7:30 would be my guess. That the room's pretty full with people that want to speak. So once the applicant's done and the commission's done with their Q&A with them on their presentation, they turn it over to the public, and they, unlike you guys where you get to put a time limit on how long they talk, we don't have the ability to put a time cap on. So we're going to be here for a while tonight. My guess is they won't take any action tonight because I'm going to guess it's going to run past 10 o'clock easy, and the commission will say we've been here 4 hours. We're checking out. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. That's probably what's going to happen.
So you don't foresee a vote? Okay.
Yeah, not tonight. I think a more likely date is March 15th, just because there's a lot of there's been and I think you've probably been copied on a lot of those emails. There's just been a ton of correspondences back and forth. So the commission needs time to address that and take it all in. Some of those we just got today, so it's hard for them to respond to 4 emails they got today when they've already gotten a huge volume of material.
Right, yeah, all right, Tom, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. Steve, is anything happening on the old Y site?
Yes, I don't have a definitive date, but we've had meetings with a potential developer of that site and gone through some conceptual things and from, what they think they're going to do versus what our expectations are and what we're going to require in terms of review on the design, as well as, trying to, speak to them about, the NRVT runs right through the back of your project. How do we get something that can, have some amenity piece to it that would work with the NRVT? So that's another thing we're talking to them about.
Yeah, we looked at it back a few years ago with the hospital, and we spent some time land use talking about that parking lot there, right? And making sure there remained access to parking for Matthews Park. And there's also some discussion back then about incorporating some of the features of those historic buildings into the new structure. So I just, maybe it's worth going back and seeing what was discussed at that time.
Yeah, my understanding is, at least as of now, that, and they may have changed their mind, the applicant that we're talking to was a little less interested in acquiring some of the adjacent parcels that were like the little leftover state pieces and a couple city pieces. It felt that perhaps that was not worth their effort to try to include that in their project. So there might be some, I think what you're talking about is that southern kind of.
It is.
Triangular piece of
that-
property.
Right.
Yeah, that may not be part of the new development, so that might remain regardless. So, but it's all definitely something to look at and talk about with the applicant when they start to refine their plans a little.
Great, thanks.
Steve, did I hear that MBI is gonna be a Wegmans? Is that still moving forward?
Yeah, and so MBI, I think they've leased space up at Merit 7 in the office towers. I don't remember which building. So I think the idea is that space is going to get fitted out for them. Once that's done, and any other lease or holds on the Wegmans property are done, they'll start with demolition, and then Wegmans will, start to fit out of the property for the grocery store.
So any other notable developments in the pipeline? Anything else? you
Yeah,
feel we should know about?
I'll be quick, and then so another property that's pretty prominent, that's kind of prominent with nothing going on, is the 280 Main Ave, which was known as the BJ site that was approved by the commission as a development a few years ago. There was litigation. The city won the litigation. Then COVID hit and the applicant has not really come forward with anything tangible at this point. We get, usually once every couple of weeks, somebody calls with an idea. The ones I've seen more recently are scaled back, a couple different commercial options, but more so leaning towards residential. But I think at some point something will happen there. But there are environmental restrictions on the property because there are contaminants within the soil from the past user of the site. Norwalk Hospital, you may remember, got approval for their new office, the new patient tower last year. So I do think at some point in 2023, they'll start renovations on that. That's a pretty significant, I mean, there's already building there, so it's not like they're taking up more real estate, just going vertical, but that's going to be a new patient tower that will, with the idea being they're not adding specific capacity for patients. The tower area they're taking down has 2 patients per room, with the idea they want to have all their rooms are 1 patient per room, so that it's not an increase in capacity, it's just reallocation of existing patient space.
Hey, Darlene, you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question, Steve. For that property, you said contaminants. Has it been determined that it's a brownfield?
Yes, it is. It's a listed site. I think it's a federally listed site.
Okay.
Yeah, in the very rear, you might not be able to see it from the street. You probably could pick it out from an aerial picture, but there is a warehousey butler stash building to the far back, I'd say the southeast corner. that's actually like the treatment building where they kind of, there's some kind of pump system that they filter out the contaminants from.
And when that property is sold, then whoever purchases it is responsible for the remediation.
Potential, somebody is going to be
Or
responsible.
this, or is the city,
No,
no, okay.
it's still the private party's responsibility. I would imagine that whomever purchases the property either gets it at a massive discount because of that, or more likely the prior ownership is on the hook. That definitely gets ironed out between the two parties prior to.
So it sounds like the city could possibly then purchase that property for a massive reduction. Or,
It's on the market. I know it's.
or you
there.
know, is it in line with housing?
It could, I mean, but keep in mind when you're doing any brownfield work, that
Mhm.
development standards for residential on a brownfield are much stricter than they are for commercial.
Yes,
So you have
as
to.
it should
you know,
be, yes.
Yeah, right, exactly, because you don't want to put anybody at risk. So
Right.
there comes clauses with that.
Okay. So it sounds like it's pretty contaminated then.
I think the materials that were there were pretty heavy solvents. And I have, it's been a while since I looked at any environmental report, but I think that, it's not, like gas station cleanup stuff is usually pretty easy because those kind of contaminants float. So it's easy to remove those and clean the site. But I think the type of contaminants that were there are not as easy to take care of.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
David, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman Kites. Yeah, just wondering where I think cannabis has opened up, right? And have you gotten applications now? And
Yes,
are
we
we
just
clear on
got,
where what our standards are and what we're looking at?
yeah, we just got 2 applications in the first day. I think it opened was Wednesday. We got one, I'm hoping I'm gonna remember the addresses correctly, 191 Main Avenue and 430 Main Avenue. The application materials should be posted by tomorrow if they're not already up on the site. I had one of my folks take care of that. I don't know, I didn't get a chance to look to see if they did that, but we'll start looking at those applications in depth next week to see where they fall. You'll remember from the ordinance discussions that in addition to like the normal planning and zoning special permit standards, there's a whole slew of other standards that they have to meet specific to cannabis. So we'll start looking at those to see if they comply or not comply. I think there's going to be another 1 or 2 applications, but we're only allowing 3. So we'll see how many we get and judge them as they come in.
And that's specifically retail. Have we had anyone with the cultivation side?
People asking questions, but very not, very just general, non-specific questions, not like I'm submitting an application, here's a detailed question. So no, at this point, I don't know if and when we'll see that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Steve, you said the applicants are looking for a dispensary at 330 and 191 Main Ave.
430 and 191 Main Ave.
430, okay. And then do they currently own or lease these properties?
I don't think so. A lot of times with these kind of transactions, either they're going to lease or the lease or the transaction is contingent on the approval from the city.
Got it. I mean, I don't remember the final area and the mapping for designations for these areas. It sounds like it got broadened from what happened a few years back when we addressed this. So, you've seen they're both on Main Ave, so I'm assuming that this area of Main Ave got opened up. Is there any other notable areas? Like, is it Connecticut Ave still a possibility? I mean, we're going to see, I guess other urban areas
Yeah.
have applications come in.
So when the medical dispensaries were approved a few years ago, they were in a very specific location, which was called the Business 1 Zone, which is along the Route 1 corridor, mostly along Connecticut Ave. but the retail cannabis was approved along the Business 1 and Business 2 corridor, which encompasses basically Westport Ave, Connecticut Ave, and Main Ave. So that those were it's almost like a upside down T about where you could go. That was part of the mapping we put together, was we tried to ideally get them spaced out a little bit in proximity to a highway on ramp, off ramp to get them in and out. And, that was kind of the thing.
Right, I'm just looking at the 430 Main Ave. I just recently saw in the paper that this whole property got sold like a few weeks back. Wonder if there's any connection there.
It very well could be. Yeah, I don't know if I'd have to look at the application specifically to see if they're listed as the owner or just the,
Right.
potential.
All right, thanks, please proceed.
Sure, and I just a couple things. I think on your agenda, you have 1517 Chestnut Street later on, or you'll have it on shortly. That's another project next to the train station, a little further south of the newer developments down there. They've submitted an application to amend the zoning regulations to tweak a historic density bonus that we have on the books now to kind of work it a little bit more friendly for their application. But that's probably a few months out before it gets wrapped up. There's a lot of traffic and infrastructure related work that needs to get done before they can submit. And the last thing I wanted to give you an update on was, which I was hoping to have sooner, but I think we're finally close to a date, is the actual update of the zoning regulations. The consultant, we ended up bringing in a third-party attorney just to review some things and go through a bunch of things, and he was very helpful. It just, everything took, takes a couple weeks longer than I always wanted to. That's been done. The consultant, I met with them Wednesday, went through all the comments. They're working on them now. They're hoping to have them back in 2 to 3 weeks. And then I'm working with the commission now on setting the public meeting dates. It'll either be at the very end of March or like the first week in April. And then the plan from there is we'll have another meeting a week or two later where staff will introduce the zoning map itself so people can kind of match up the text with the map, with the idea being we want people to look at the zoning text first and try to understand it, get a little bit familiar with it before we introduce the map. Because if we just introduce the map, all you're going to look at is the map and be focused on the map. So we're going to do it in 2 phases. And then from there, we plan on working through council on setting up meetings in the different districts. We'll circle back with you after we get the dates a little more ironed out. Happy to go to wherever the location is that the council members would like to do it in. And then from there, we'll probably offer up digital meetings, or I should say virtual meetings with, if there are different neighborhood groups that want to meet subsequent to that. And so while all that's going on, the Planning and Zoning Commission will also be meeting regularly to go over different topics like residential zoning, commercial zoning, sustainability, mobility, anything on those topics that are related to the zoning regulations. So they are comfortable with an end date to try to have a series of public meetings sometime in the spring on just to get people's feedback. What does the public think? And then at some point, we're going to have a P&Z webpage set up just for zoning regulations comments. So you can either there'll be an interactive form where you could apply comments, get us feedback on the different sections so we can collect it and collate it in the appropriate place. And we're also putting together a series of guide documents for folks that kind of give a summary of the different topics, as I indicated, like residential zoning. Here's what the changes are, here's what it actually means, and kind of break it down in more simple terms, because some of this, it's zoning text and it's a 400 something page document. So it's going to get a little wonky for people to try to get in the weeds. It is really graphics heavy and chart heavy, so that makes it a little easier to view, but we want to try to make it explanatory before we actually release it.
Great. How are we doing on the waterfront study? I know there were some hurdles to get over, but I'm hoping to see some activity with that.
Yeah, Jessica and I have been talking. I think the next step at which we're going to start doing, hopefully next week or so, is setting up meetings with you folks on a however you want to do it, like a one-on-one, a couple of you at a time basis to go through some of the concerns and questions you had, address those, and then bring it back for comment again. And then, back to the commission for, adoption of the POCD amendment. That's kind of the next steps there.
Any other questions for Steve before we let him go?
Are you going to come to us and talk about, are you going to come to the council and talk about planning and zoning regs? Would you come to this committee just to give us a preview or something? So we can,
Sure, I'll do both, whatever you'd like. It's fine.
I think that'd be great, John, just to, for us to get familiar before we go out to our constituents.
Sounds like a plan. Anybody else? Okay, Steve, yeah, I'm gonna may call you back in early summer to give us another update on development, and I think I and others find it useful to know what's going on around town.
And I'll get you the information on those sites. And once the project map is updated, I'll send that out so you have that to take a look.
Please do. Thank you.
Sure. All right, have a good night.
You too. Good luck tonight.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on to item A2 and the ULI housing plan and affordable housing plan. Item 2A is to authorize Mayor Harry W. Rilling to execute a contract for a housing plan between the city of Norwalk and the Urban Land Institute in the amount not to exceed 80,000 by the way of source procurement or count number. I guess we're not allowed to have account numbers anymore on this committee, so I think, but we have ARPA fundings, ARPA funds. Would someone like to move this item? Thank you, Mr. Livingston. I believe Jess, you'll be discussing this and going over. If someone has a nice slideshow ready for us.
Don't worry, it's only 3 slides. Good evening, everyone. Wanted to present with you something that we're really excited to talk about tonight. It's a housing plan and an affordable housing plan. And, we're excited in the sense that it's something that is identified in the POCD, where we have a goal that Norwalk has neighborhoods and housing that maintains a variety of choice. And in affordability and in style. And you can see here that Chapter 4 is dedicated specifically to housing choice and healthy lifestyle. And it spells out that we will be committed to creating a housing plan and that housing plan will have a affordability component to it. And with all of the discussions that have been going on and the development that we've seen, which we're extremely excited about, as Steve had presented to you, we have a huge opportunity to be able to push forward different sites such as the West Avenue site, the old YMCA site, the Toll Brothers Loman site, and of course, Webster Street lot that we've been talking about that Brian presented the preferred developer to you a couple weeks ago. But Chapter 4 lays out that we are committed to building a housing plan and we are committed to building an affordable housing plan. And as you know, the Common Council has created an ad hoc committee for affordable housing and have talked about an affordable housing trust as well, in addition to looking at the affordable housing trust amount that is in there to be able to further support affordable housing in the city. And the way in which this discussion started was the package that we brought to you a number of months ago, which was an $8 million package for economic community development. And it included $120,000 for an affordable housing plan. And at that point in time, you had supported that request and it went to Common Council for the support of Common Council as well. But as we have been working through different projects, we have been doing separate planning exercises, specifically for the South Norwalk train station and the development opportunities, the infill opportunities we have there. And we wanted to be able to focus not only on the affordable housing plan, but how affordable housing fits into a larger, broader housing plan for the city itself, and helping us determine what type of affordable housing we need, where we need that housing, if it should be in the urban core or if we should be looking elsewhere, what affordability levels we require, and so on and so forth. And so we've developed a plan for your consideration, which is a proposed approach to develop a housing plan and affordable housing plan. And as I said, you've committed ARPA funds to the affordable housing plan portion, which is $120,000, which was approved by Common Council. And we've been moving that forward. But as I said, we really want to focus on the housing universe in Norwalk and the larger housing plan. We have a really unique opportunity to work with a group called the Urban Land Institute. The Urban Land Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit, and it has over 45,000 national experts. They're real estate land use experts, and they have something called an advisory panel and an advisory program. And what that means is that different national experts that are all over the country come into a community and help to determine potential next steps and land use opportunities and affordable housing opportunities for the community. So we have an opportunity to be able to work with the Urban Land Institute to bring 3 to 5 experts into the city for a 3-day program. And that 3-day program would include them having background materials in advance of arriving to the city of Norwalk, taking a tour of the city of Norwalk with a selected group. It would include them interviewing at least 20 stakeholders to be able to understand what the vision for housing is in the city. And of course, we would continue to work with the community to be able to do that, much like we built an advisory committee for the South Norwalk train station work that we were doing, and also that we'll be building for the Webster Street lot work that, that the redevelopment agency is leading. With the 20 people or the 20 stakeholders that are interviewed, they'll come together as an expert group and they will talk about best practices and talk about some of the land patterns that we have, along with the new zoning that will be passed. And they'll actually put together a presentation that they will give to us at the end of the 3-day period. And the thought is that we can coincide that particular presentation with this meeting, possibly for a future month. At that point in time, a few weeks after the presentation, they'll be able to give us a report of up to 20 pages that outlines best practices that they've seen in different parts of the country. And it really is an objective way to bring in national experts to be able to look at what we're doing here in Norwalk. The idea here is that we've been doing planning exercises for each particular project, and we really want to look at the city as a whole. We want to look holistically at the city when we think about housing. We know that there have been different housing projects across the city. They haven't all been in our urban core, and we want to understand what the balance of that looks like. But it does provide that independent view. The process can actually take place within the next 5 to 6 months. It takes a couple of months for ULI to be able to get the background, for them to be able to research the background, and for us to be able to identify stakeholders that they would then be able to interview. The 3-day process is a total cost of $80,000. And so we are requesting $80,000 of ARPA money to be dedicated or committed to that. There is also a 5-day program. The 5-day program brings between 8 and 10 experts to the city, and they interview up to 100 people. That 5-day program is a total cost of $135,000, and it includes a report of up to 50 pages. It's more in depth, and it has more nuanced information just based on the fact that they have more time. The experts have more time in the city, and they have the opportunity to interview more people. We feel, in talking with the mayor's office and the redevelopment agency, we feel as though the 80,000 3-day program is suitable for what we want to achieve. And in part, it's suitable for what we want to achieve because it's married to the affordable housing plan, which will take place at the same time in parallel and dovetail with this opportunity that we have with the Urban Land Institute. So if I could go back to the affordable housing plan, I just wanted to give you a quick update of where we are with that and talk a little bit how we think the two of them will be married together and will work together. The affordable housing plan, as I mentioned, is $120,000 and you approved that. But what we're looking for today is the approval to move forward with a vendor called AKRF. AKRF was the sole response in the RFP that we put out for the affordable housing plan. Which is sometimes a little concerning. However, we worked with AKRF multiple times. We're currently working with them on a couple of projects, and we're happy with their deliverables. And they've always been a great project manager and always given us good quality work. We've met with them numerous times. And while we've been talking to them about the scope of work, Connecticut actually came together and created an affordable housing working group. As you know, the affordable housing plan for the state was actually due at the end of June. And we as the city emailed and wrote a letter to the state to ask them for an extension because we knew that we wanted to use ARPA funds to dig a little bit deeper on the affordable housing plan. As we did that, this affordable housing working group got together at the state and they drafted a report. And that report has 27 recommendations. So we've delayed signing on with AKRF because we've been able to, we wanted to wait until the final draft for the working group has come out before we actually sign the contract. And we believe that this was the right decision. We've actually reworked the scope with AKRF 3 times to be able to be more in line with what the state affordable housing plan, what's required in there, and the 27 best practices. So at this point in time, we've incorporated those 27 best practices. We feel very good about the work in which they're going to do. They'll be focused on a much more quantitative report, looking at not only affordable housing, but also market rate housing. And the scope that we've agreed upon, we're comfortable with. So the request before you tonight is to be able to move forward with contracting with AKRF, which is the identified and preferred vendor for this work. And the affordable housing plan process will be completed in about 10 to 12 months. So from a next step standpoint regarding the advisory services program for the Urban Land Institute, we're asking for a few things this evening. We're asking for your support in being able to move forward with contracting with the Urban Land Institute for $80,000 to hold a 3-day program, which is the advisory services program. And we would do that under a sole source procurement, which the language was provided to you as background. The sole source is focused on the 45,000 members that they have that are real estate and land use experts that would be able to come directly to Norwalk and work with stakeholders and residents here. And the second thing that we're asking for, and I should actually say regarding the Urban Land Institute, because we didn't bring it to you earlier in the larger package, we don't have an account number for ARPA. So because of that, we would need to go through the finance committee. And to go through the finance committee, that would then allocate or identify and then create an account number for the Urban Land Institute work, which would then go on to the Common Council for approval. And of course, in saying that, we've been working very closely with Greg, the council president, to be able to focus on the Affordable Housing Committee's work, the ad hoc Affordable Housing Committee's work, and we'll continue partnering with them moving forward. It's been really helpful to be able to understand the work that they've done to date and how that will marry with the housing plan or this larger ULI effort moving forward. The second thing that we're looking for is, as I mentioned, your support to be able to move forward with the AKRF vendor for the affordable housing plan. And as I mentioned, we've reworked the scope with them multiple times. We're very happy with where we are now. That already has an ARPA account number, so we don't need to go through finance. We just need to be able to seek your approval this evening, and then we would be able to take it right to council to be able to contract with them and move forward. In saying that, you know, we will need to organize with them the timing of these projects, making sure that the work of ULI and the work of AKRF is, again, complementary to one another and is brings out one particular piece of deliverable that we're all very proud of and that we know encompasses not only stakeholder feedback from the one-on-one interviews, but also the larger quantitative work that AKRF is doing. And so I will leave it there and happy to answer any questions.
Diane, I see you have your hand up, or would you have?
I do, Chairman, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Jessica, I appreciate your work, and it's always great to be able to converse with you. I appreciate how you make yourself so available. I think you probably may know my question a little bit from our conversation earlier, just in the overall scope of development happening within Norwalk and in the urban core. With this AKRF, do they have anyone on their panel, like, or anyone in their, I'm sorry for my brain just freezing right now, but with their expertise, is there anyone there that actually works or understands affordable development when it comes to things that may look like co-ops or condos or stuff like that. That could be if the overall project is an affordable unit within the development. Can affordable, I hate saying affordable housing, it's not affordable, but can that look different within one structure? Let's just say there are apartments, but there are condos, there are co-op spaces. Like, how can we also just bring into this work and into someone with the expertise of how affordable ownership may be able to meld into not only this development, but within Norwalk overall? Like, do you see that ever even happening? Is there a true reality to that at all?
Yeah, I think there's absolutely a reality to that. And the truth is that, we're always looking to learn more and understand best practices from across the country and adopt best practices and the way in which we're thinking about it. And, we have a really great redevelopment agency that helps to manage our CDBG and HUD funds. We're very close with the state through economic community development and housing. And we work really closely with the federal delegation as well. So I think that there's a ton of opportunity to be able to explore different types of ideas on how to address affordable housing. And part of the idea in being able to bring in national experts and also work with a group like AKRF is to be able to have access to experts that have done creative affordable housing plans and identified those best practices, but not only identify those best practices, help us as a city be able to adopt them, right? So understand ordinances, understand local regulations, understand our local zoning, and be able to help us build in a meaningful way different approaches to be able to adopt affordable housing and think about it in a little bit of a different way. And I think the city has, with Lower Fairfield County having the challenges that it has with affordability, I think that being able to pull in experts that have worked in different parts of the country that have seen affordability issues like ours will be really helpful to us.
I appreciate that answer, because that's 100% my point. If we find a different way of making this look like a structure that can have some generational longevity to it, so that families will, even if someone passes or whatever, it doesn't leave that family, leave that structure, leave that community. I think it just gives us more longevity here. Overall, that's the taxpayer, that's our development, that's our structure, that's our stronghold. And just hoping that that could be part of the conversation,
Absolutely.
Tom, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. So Jess, first off, I think these are both great proposals, and I really think that the housing plan as a whole is really important for us to do. I think we need to get a sense of what the entire city versus just one particular area or areas. But I want to ask a couple of questions about the deliverables on the housing plan. What do you anticipate seeing is question one, and how does that what sort of the interplay with that and the zoning rewrite?
Yeah, so I think, and then I think there's a third piece too, which is the affordable housing plan as well. So I think there's intersection in all three of them. And the way that I see it is that we've worked with AKRF to redo their scope to include data collection and data analysis on both market rate and affordable units to be able to identify both of those. The way that I see housing is that there's sort of a universe of housing, and that affordable housing is a subset. And so it's important to be able to include the numbers. And I don't know here in the city of Norwalk if we've ever really had a great handle on having a vendor or a consultant come in and help us understand that. I think that from the ULI side of the house, it really is an independent, objective view that is not led by the city, where we will have these experts meeting with folks offsite away from City Hall to be able to have a little bit of a different dynamic and a little bit of a different conversation. And what I think this will bring us is a lot more of a qualitative takeaway in helping us be able to build a communication and a framework around the planning aspect of housing and what we need and why we need it and where we need it. And being able to use some of the data that's coming out of AKRF study to be able to understand that as background, and then be able to really shape the interviews around where we want to see this housing and why. I think that we've learned so much through the South Norwalk Train Station Advisory Council group that we've been working with, and we've learned so much working with the MLK Corridor Initiative on, and so much with the business community, and being able to go out and listen to residents and have them build a relationship with them where, you know, it's gone from, it's really evolved to a situation where we've learned what the community wants and how they want it. Whether it be grocery stores or daycare facilities or medical offices or more green space, more trees, more sidewalks, you know, and it's just been really helpful for us to be able to understand what that want is. When we approach these types of developments, we have an opportunity to work with developers on what the communities want. And sometimes we hear what the community doesn't want or what neighborhoods don't want, but sometimes we don't always hear what they do want. And so I think that the ULI portion will allow us to be able to bring in these national experts that are real estate and land use experts that will not only be able to identify redevelopment and infill opportunities and be able to identify across the city from a citywide standpoint, but also address using data and some of the stakeholder interviews that they do, more of that planning piece on what the community wants and how they want it. And I think that being able to have a third party come in and be able to lead that conversation, especially in a setting that is more of a closed setting where you're sort of having those one-on-one interviews, I think will be really helpful. I think the third piece that you mentioned is the zoning piece, and how will this overlay with the zoning piece? The zoning will have a number of months that we will be working with the public to be able to understand feedback and comments before anything is brought to you for adoption or planning and zoning for adoption. And I think that we have an opportunity to be able to have AKRF and the ULI folks look over that proposed zoning and be able to help us understand inclusionary zoning and what we're doing currently versus what best practices are. I think this is a really great opportune time in the sense that we're actually redoing zoning for the first time in 30 years, you know, and then to be able to work with these two groups to not only build a qualitative approach, but a quantitative approach while zoning is being looked at, and actually, you know, building a new zoning local regs, I think is huge timing. So I know I went on with that, but I'm really excited about it. And I just think this is a huge opportunity for us to really wrap our arms around the next steps for Norwalk.
Yeah, I guess one follow-on question, they're only going to speak to 20 stakeholders. That's not a lot. Are you comfortable that there'll be broad enough spectrum?
Yeah, I think there, yeah. So there is a 5-day option, a 5-day program. It's $135,000. It's partly why we didn't include the contract in the background materials, because we wanted to be able to get a sense from you if you felt like the 3-day program with 20 stakeholders was comprehensive enough, or if the 5-day program for $135,000 with 8 to 10 national experts interviewing 100 people was something more along the lines of what of something that people were comfortable with, you as a council were comfortable with. You know, we feel like 20 stakeholders is a good amount. We think that we might be able to work with them to bring together groups. You know, if they were to hold 20 interviews, we might be able to include a few more people in those interviews, and we can get a better sense of that as we work with them. There is a lot of background. We've collected a lot of information through the MLK Corridor Initiative, and we'll continue to do that. And we've collected a lot of information through the South Norwalk work, in addition to the Webster Street Lot advisory group that we'll be bringing together with redevelopment as well. So, you know, it's not, although it's 20 stakeholders with the one-on-one interviews, we think that there's background where we'll be able to provide that to them. But there is another option. It's a little bit more money. We weren't sure what the support would be for going for something that's $135,000, but there's an opportunity there to be able to interview 100 people. So, you know, it's a hard question to answer. And, you know, we felt like 20 was a good number, but I can see that I could understand why some would think there's a little bit of concern if we were to look at 20 instead of 100.
Well, I mean, I think obviously more would be better, but I think it's a very expensive program. So I mean, if you guys are comfortable with 20, I'm comfortable with 20. I have to ask the question though. Thanks.
Jess, you mind not sharing your screen anymore?
Of course.
Thanks.
Sorry,
other
I should have
questions?
stopped that earlier.
Okay.
So do we have to decide on which option tonight?
Well, we're recommending $80,000 with the 20 stakeholders, and the 3 to 5 experts that would come nationally to work with the city. We think that that's enough because at the same time, the affordable housing plan is going to be going on. So it's not as though it's sort of one or the
Not being
other.
touched,
And
right, okay.
right. So I think that between the outreach that's going to go on with AKRF and being
Yeah.
able to pull together that feedback and feeding that feedback to the ULI folks as background before they come in, I think will be really helpful for them. I think if we were not doing the affordable housing plan, then we probably would recommend
Would go with the, right,
the
right.
larger plan. But I think that with the zoning outreach that we'll be doing and some advisory groups that we'll be talking to, in addition to AKRF, that
Mhm.
the $80,000 option is probably a good option. So
Okay.
just as a recap, what we're asking for is two things. One, for your support on the ULI work and being able to move it forward to the finance committee for them to have the same presentation and if supported, then provide an account number for the work. And the second is to be able to allow us to move forward with contracting with AKRF for the affordable housing plan portion.
Dave, you have a question?
No, you just answered my question, Jess. Thanks. It was sort of on the heels of what Darlene was asking. Great. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? All right, Mr. Livingston moved the item, so now we'll call for the vote. All in favor, please raise your hand and signify yes.
Aye.
And that is unanimous. Great.
Thanks,
Item.
everyone.
So now we got to move on to item B. And that's authorize Mayor Harry W. Rilling to execute a contract with affordable housing plan between the city of Norwalk and AKRF Inc. in the amount not to exceed $120,000. Account number noted. Would someone like to move this item? Thank you, Ms. Shanahan. Jesse, you'll be addressing this one as well.
Brian will be addressing this one.
It's the button on the left, Brian. There
Sorry,
you go. Good.
I thought that was an item on the, can you please go back to that item, John, just real quick? I'm not sure. This is on the CDBG funding or the affordable housing?
The affordable housing. AKRF Inc. in the amount.
Yeah, Justin, is that the one that you were?
Oh,
That's the second one, Jess, right?
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I missed that. So the first one was to contract with ULI as a sole source for 80,000. I'm sorry, Chairman Kites. And the second one is to contract with AKRF. That's true. Sorry, Brian.
Anybody have any questions for that item? I think we already kind of covered that. Okay, Ms. Shanahan, move the item. All in favor, please raise your hand and signify yes. Darlene?
Yes.
Okay. Just how you call me out on your committee.
Thank you.
All right, item passes unanimously. Great, thank you, Jess. Now moving up on to redevelopment agency. And item one, first up is a discussion of CDBG funding. Mr. Bedoli, welcome. How are you?
Good, how you doing?
Good, sir.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. This is a very brief CDBG update. We're sort of in the intermediary state between the presentations that were given at the last meeting to you all, and then the rankings that occur in between us actually developing what's referred to as the annual action plan, which puts together all the projects, programs and organizations that you all selected to fund. This is really just an informational item for you all, just indicating we were able to accommodate everyone's top choice in the service category with a minor reduction based on the amount of available funding. There was a slight increase above what we had allocated in the top one versus what we had available. It was about $7,000 across the board. So you're still talking 95+% funding for each of the top first choice service organizations. And we were also fortunate to be able to fund all the housing and facility projects that were actually requested to some extent, full funding for the ones that were voted on in the facility category. So this is really just informational. Just want to make sure to touch base with you all, show you what the outcomes of your respective voting was. And what the next steps are, we're going to be working to put this into an annual action plan for final vote at the next ECD meeting.
Thanks, Brian. And thank you everyone that got that redevelopment of your choices and got us to this point. There's no action required, but if there are any questions for Brian? Yeah. Okay. And you said, Brian, we'll be looking at that in April, the action plan?
Correct. You'll have the full action plan that just compiled all these into a larger document.
Great. Okay, seeing no questions, now move on to item B2, which is a discussion and update on 15-7 Chestnut Land Disposition Agreement, LDA. A little bit discussion, and I believe item 2A would require action, correct?
Correct. Yes, I'll explain that in terms of what we're trying to request.
Okay, so I might as well move the item, get through this. So item 2A is a referral of 824 referral conveyance to a portion of 30 Monroe Street in favor of Sono TOD2 LLC. Would someone like to move that item? Thank you, Mr. Livingston. Yeah, please proceed, Brian.
Okay, great. So in addition to the referral that we're requesting, my primary purpose tonight is I wanted to come to you all with an update and really bring back to your attention the proposed development project. I know Stephen mentioned it in terms of 1517 Chestnut. This is the development site at the corner of Chestnut and Henry that came out of our work developing a stationary TOD plan around the South Norwalk train station. So to sort of refresh everyone's memory, this is the project where approximately an acre of the surface parking lot on the southeast portion of the train station, currently hosting 60 surface parking spaces, would be sold to Spinnaker Real Estate Partners through their entity Sono TOD2 to construct a 200-unit mixed-use development and replace the commuter parking that they would be, purchasing in a structured garage contained within the new building. Obviously, with any sort of transaction where we're talking about disposing of city land, this transaction will occur through the development of a land disposition agreement, or LDA, which is what I'll refer to it as we move forward through tonight. And a detailed map of the proposed conveyance and requisite easements are actually included in your agenda packet, because that's a key part which I'll talk about for the planning and zoning 824 review that we're requesting referral for tonight. We're going to come to you next month, April 6th, with additional project detail. We're going to try to get that to you as early as possible later this month. With the revised LDA term sheet, if you recall, last spring you all approved an LDA term sheet. I'm going to talk a little bit tonight about some of the modifications that were made after going through the due diligence period with the developer. And we'll want to schedule a public hearing too at the next meeting, which we could talk about later in the presentation. Really just wanted to use tonight to reach out early, given the time it's been since we last spoke, make sure there's ample opportunity for engagement on the overall project before the public hearing and any vote on the item. So I'm definitely happy to answer any specific project questions. That's sort of the 35,000-foot view, but I thought it'd be beneficial to maybe start with an update on what has transpired since our last discussion in terms of this project. Since we approved the LDA term sheet through the ECD last spring, we've been working through a period of due diligence with the developer. If you'll recall, you also approved an access agreement to, kind of do a little more environmental testing, do some site planning, and kind of get the details worked out. If you also recall, it was originally contemplated as a two-phase development project. That has since been determined to be infeasible due to various building requirements, issuance of COs, and the cost that would be attributable, multi-millions of dollars more. The developer had originally thought they could possibly get away with that to accommodate the temporary parking issues. We've since developed an alternative strategy for that with adjacent temporary parking options that will be available, so we don't disrupt the 60 spaces while they're getting reconstructed in the garage. So it's been converted now, and this will be reflected in the LDA terms just that we bring for next month to a single construction phase. Which actually ends up working out better for us, given the performance requirements, I believe we discussed, attributable to the $6 million infrastructure assistance package, the grant we were able to get from DECD as a result of this project. There's a number of performance requirements in that new funding program, the Community Challenge Grant, that we need to, deliver these units. So getting it done as a one phase, 200 unit project really reduces any exposure in that regard. We've of course also been concurrently working across multiple city departments, including planning and zoning, public works, and TMP, as Steven mentioned, to take a deeper dive into the various traffic and other impacts and mitigation strategies that we are anticipating. Will obviously be resolved through the zoning process, but we want to have some insight as we structure this deal and refine the terms of the LDA. So, a lot of work has occurred since we last spoke, but we're now at the point in the negotiation where we feel comfortable advancing the discussion and public process. So as I mentioned, the specific actions we're requesting is obviously the referral for the 824, but also just noting and just wanting to put it out there that we'll be having a public hearing is planned, or we want to schedule one with your consent for the next April 6th meeting, where we could actually vote on the LDA terms that are going to be presented. Really just the updated terms that have already been considered by this group as well as the full council. The one last area I wanted to touch on before we get into any questions or the specifics of the request relates to a key area that I know you all brought up at the last time in terms of how we've mitigated risk sort of inherent to a development project of this type. Particularly considering and being considerate of the issues with the POCO project. And I think there's a very interesting approach that City Legal has developed through a lot of discussions, a lot of thought. But basically, I'll speak a little bit to that. We can always answer any questions you may have. But the way we've addressed this is really through a comprehensive package of risk mitigation measures and strategies. So using escrows, using performance bonds, personal guarantees that were not included in the LDA for that other project, have now been imparted into this transaction to limit the city's exposure. And a lot of thought has gone into this. I have to start by just commending Darren Callahan from City Legal for how much time and effort and focus he's placed on this, because I really feel like he's put the city in a very good position through this, and we'll go into the details. I think one key distinction that I want to make is a big difference in this project is that the developer is paying fair market value for the property on the front end. Whereas in the POCO project, obviously the land was contributed by the city RDA. So that compensation is occurring on the front end. We're creating an escrow account basically to protect the city's interest while the replacement parking is getting constructed. So we'll be looking to issue performance payments through that escrow account. So there's $1 million of contribution that the city is making through the transaction because and I won't go into too much detail because we can discuss it later, but because the value of the parking revenue only offsets so much of the construction of the garage, and structured parking is so expensive. That said, that $1 million is going to be paid out in performance payments. So the developer is going to be incentivized to obtain those funds through completion of the parking. And again, I want to introduce this tonight. There's a lot of complexity with this, which we'll have time, to go over. Just wanted to start, getting your thoughts and perspectives. Another thing that we put into the LDA terms is that the property is only going to be conveyed once the zoning approvals are in place and there's a permit ready letter issued. That is far different from other transactions, but I think a best practice in the fact that you're bringing it up to that point when we have, as much confidence as we can that the project is going to be moving forward without any sort of, limiting that exposure inherent to something like this. I can't help but mention, we're working with a thoroughly vetted Norwalk-based company, Spinnaker, with a demonstrated history of performance, which I think is a key distinction here. And like I said, we're going to go through all the details in the LDA term sheets, but I did want to at least start the conversation at this meeting just to give us enough time to talk as a group. And I know, and to work with you all through the public process. So those are my general updates. I know I covered a lot, but I'm happy to touch on any questions you may all have.
Oh, Thomas, sorry, I didn't see your little pale hand over there. In the corner.
That's okay, thanks. I don't know how it got that way, but it did. Yeah, thanks, Brian. We've spoken about this, and I think it'd be helpful just for those watching to get a sense of sort of the financial penalties, if you will, for that parking, like what happens, and then sort of a dollar viewpoint in terms of if they renege or somehow don't develop. I think it might be useful.
Yeah, so we're working on the final acquisition price just to refine it based off of the environmental considerations on the site, the brownfield work that we're doing. But The original purchase price was $4.6 million. So whatever that ends up being, which will be refined in the next couple of weeks here, will be paid to the city upfront. So you're talking, you know, $4 to $4.5 million of guaranteed income at the conveyance. There's $1 million in a performance bond that will be available to the city should the parking not be constructed. So that can be called on if at any point. And then there's also $1 million a personal completion guarantee that is being offered by the developer in favor of DECD because they're actually securing our $6 million grant with that. So we're talking about $6.5 million of exposure the developer is going to have in terms of securing the transaction should anything fall through. Obviously, they're going to be incentivized once they put $4+ million down to get this project done. And that's, you know, contingent on the transaction. And then also the benefit to the city is that we're securing the $6 million grant with the $1 million, but we're still getting access to that $5 million for public infrastructure and improvements to affordable housing in the area.
And just to follow on that, 2 questions, right? So one, the city is arranging, with the developers arranging for short-term or replacement parking, if you interim parking, correct?
Correct.
And the other question is there going to be a, what's the time frame on this? Will it be embedded into the LDA such that they have to complete this by a date certain?
Yeah, and I think that's also part of the performance on our grant. We have a 5-year timeline that we're working towards, but the developer is actively engaged to move that sooner. And that's demonstrable through the fact that, as Steve mentioned, they're already, you know, starting the process through planning and zoning. So I spoke with them before this meeting, and what the current estimated timeline is that, you know, they're hoping to potentially secure zoning approvals by June. From there, you're looking at about another 6 months to prepare construction documents, financing, and the sort of the details to obtain a building permit. And then looking at an 18 to 20 month construction period thereafter. So I would say on the generous side, 36 months from closing, pending any, you know, sort of delays or disruptions in the public approvals along the way.
Great. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? No. Okay. The item was moved by Mr. Livingston. All in favor, please raise your hand and signify yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Darlene. So the motion passes. Brian, we look forward to hearing from you about this in the near future.
Mr. Chairman, is there anything that needs to occur to schedule the public hearing? I'm just not familiar if there's any action that needs to occur.
I believe
April 6th.
10-day. I mean, talk to Jess, but you know, the usual.
Yeah, we have all that worked out with legal. I shouldn't know if you needed to do anything, so I appreciate it.
Yep, no problem. Okay, guys, before I call for a motion to adjourn, I just want to remind everyone that I believe you all have received your capital budget books. Have you all? Just so I can, okay, great. Next meeting, April meeting, well, this is the one where we actually, all the department heads go before this committee, and we have the opportunity to not add to the or decrease the mayor's recommendation, but we have the ability to move money around. I think it's a great opportunity that's been useful to this council in the past, like the operating budget where we just approve a number and have no control of the allocation of that funding. So I advise you to please recommend you please take a look at your capital budget books and you know, speak to department heads, see if there's any money anyone would like to be moved around, anything you feel is important to you. Now's your time to do it. So like I said, that'll be at the April meeting, which will be here soon enough. Oh, I see, Darlene, you have a question?
No, I just wanted to, I had a comment before we
Please.
adjourn.
Proceed.
So I just wanted to say thank you to Jessica and Brian for this amazing work that's going on. And it is very forward thinking, particularly, you know, what you talked about, Jessica, and I'm just so pleased to just be a part of this process and looking forward to the results and the work that's going to come out of it. So I appreciate both of you and all your staff and the hard work that you all are doing, but the results, the potential that it is bringing to the city. So thank you.
Thank you, Darlene. Diane, I see you have your hand up as well.
I just wanted to say thank you to Brian, just the same way I said thank you to Jessica. Sorry for the children stuff in the background, but you guys have been very great in your work and very able to get in contact with. And I just wanted to give the same thank you that I gave Jessica to Brian, because they were both very helpful.
Yeah, I ditto to both those statements. I totally agree. You guys are doing great work. And that smile of yours, Brian, and both of you, you're doing great work. Anything else before we sign off? Okay, seeing none, motion to adjourn. All right, everyone, have a great night.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Right.
Good night.